Hello and welcome to the 19th annual Caithness International Science Festival and this evening's presentation, Space Hub Sutherland. I'm Ian Bakey, Chairman of Science 03. Here with me tonight is Nicola MacLeod, the Festival Coordinator, our presenter tonight, Roy Kirk from HIE, and helping to moderate and look after the Q&A session is June Love, Stakeholder Relations Manager with the Space Hub Sutherland project. Before I begin, I'd like to do a little plug. The Science Festival has put together an activity book and there's lots of puzzles in it. And normally we run a primary school competition and a secondary school competition where we get 1,000 entries. But this year we couldn't do it. So Nicola MacLeod and the Science Festival Committee have put together this activity book. It's available in primary schools and also free of charge at Tesco's and Lidl in Wick and Thurso. There's loads of copies, so go and you get them. There's lots of games to play over Easter and there's a competition in it. Thanks. A bit of housekeeping. This event is being recorded, however, your screens are not. It's a very popular event, so please direct all your questions through the question and answer button at the bottom, and we'll answer as many as we can once Roy's finished his presentation. As an audience, you have an opportunity to upvote questions, so if there's a question that no one else has thought of and you're keen to have answered, give it a thumbs up and it'll move up the list. We welcome your questions and comments. So at the end, near the end of the talk, if you'd like to give us some feedback, both to the festival and for the presenter, please type in the comments at the end, and I'll give Roy some feedback. Roy has 25 years experience in economic development, include most recently oversight of the major infrastructure projects, including port development of 20 million, tourism projects and other tourism developments and other projects. He's now the project director of Space Hub Sutherland and is here to provide an overview of how the project has progressed to date, what steps are next, and explore what the possibility of launching into an orbit from the North Highlands means for the local area. So without any further ado, it's time to hand over to Captain Kirk, who's going to warp us away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and what a great introduction. I have had the good fortune to serve in the British Army as a captain, but of course I'm now delighted to be Captain Kirk of the Enterprise and making fantastic things happening here in the North Highlands. So Space Hub Sutherland is the project June and myself and others have been working on for about 5.5 years. Overnight success after 5.5 years, I hear you say. So this opening slide shows the entrance into the Launch Operation Control Center in terms of what will be happening on the Moyne in a couple of years. So I wonder if we can just go on to the next slide, please, Nicola. So it is really working in partnership. I've had, as Ian has mentioned, the privilege of working here in Caithness and Sutherland over the last 13 years, but the last 5.5 of which we've been focusing on the development of Space Hub Sutherland. When I was talking to people about this opportunity, and indeed with June about 5.5 years ago, people were certainly regarding us as being very optimistic. When we first started, we thought the chance of success was about 5% to actually say put satellites into orbit from here in the North Highlands. But next, please, Nicola. We've been working closely with a number of other people, so we appreciate not only my colleagues in High and the wider team, but the UK Space Agency. In 2018, the Prime Minister announced that out of 26 proposals, the Southern Vertical Launch Facility was the one that the UK Space Agency was putting money into. We're so appreciative of the Scottish Government and the support that they have given to us through ministers such as Ivan McKee and other officials who have been incredibly helpful in taking the project forward. And certainly last but not least, we love working with Orbex. Orbex was, 5 years ago, a new company, and they are really doing some fantastic work at building the launch vehicle that will be launched from the Moyne in Sutherland. Next slide, please, Nicola. So why Sutherland? There are a number of points listed here. The fact that, as you can see from the map, that we effectively launched from the Moyne Peninsula and then very quickly, within about 5 kilometres, are heading over the sea and heading north is really important for a safety reason, but also for operations. The access to orbits is very important. We will be flying into something that's called a low Earth orbit. That's about 500 kilometers high. It doesn't feel very low, but compared to a geostationary orbit, which is about 26,000 kilometers up, it is low. That gives us really great access to observe the Earth and also to help with telecommunication satellites. The mainland location is also very important. We have found in speaking with companies, the ability from anywhere in the UK mainland to get in a white van, deliver a small satellite or any other piece of technical equipment is really important. We have a fantastic range of clever people, including the supply chain from Dounreay. That's been really important in, again, working with companies to see how what we're doing here can really help the whole of the UK move forward. We have a very supportive environment. I want to pay credit to the local crofters, particularly, who have been incredibly helpful and also challenged us and pushed us quite a bit. We appreciate it and acknowledge their help. You may also be aware that Scotland itself has a fabulous, thriving space sector. So, for example, more satellites are made in Glasgow than anywhere outside of North America. And last but not least, as I've already mentioned, both the UK and the Scottish government has been incredibly supportive as we bring forward one of the crucial aims in terms of having sovereign launch for the United Kingdom here in the north. Next slide, please. So this is an artist's impression of how the launch pad will look. You see just to the top left, Ben Huchik on the Moyne, which rises up towards the north. It shows an illustration of a launch vehicle with a spacecraft attached. The total height of that launch vehicle and spacecraft, as you'll see later, is about 17 meters. We'll be working with other companies to launch from Sutherland. I've mentioned Orbex. We're currently in discussion with 4 other launch service providers who are considering launching their vehicles in Sutherland. The thing that's really exciting for us is not only the fact that we will be putting payloads up to about 500 kilometers high and have them traveling about 27,000 kilometers an hour, but we will be bringing forward to the north real opportunities in launch and space manufacture and other downstream activities. So it really is introducing a fantastically interesting sector to here in the north. And again, as well as these high-tech jobs, what we're seeing is that the UK increasingly is realizing that without its own launch capability, it's missing out in the global market. Fantastic things that already happened, but we do need to make sure we can launch from the UK. Next slide, please. So again, just how are we doing? It has been, overnight success after 5 years. Way back in 2014, I remember June was kind enough to represent the county going down to Liverpool, the arduous thing she does to serve the county. And there she met a number of companies who we floated the idea of having vertical launch. And they were very, very interested and very supportive. So we had discussions with the crofters about the potential of using their land, and we have found, for very good scientific reasons, the site really is a cracking site and will give an optimum use over a number of factors. So last year we finished the design of the spaceport, and we obtained in August planning approval from the Highland Council. We have had good work with the statutory bodies such as Nature Scot, previously SNH, and SEPA, and other bodies, and we appreciate their again challenge to us, but also the ability to make progress. We are looking this year. We have a hearing at the Scottish Land Court because we're using crofting land, and as strange as it might sound, that the founders of the legislation for crofting 150 years ago did not anticipate that a spaceport might be part of a crofting activity. And also we have a judicial review from Wildland led by Mr. Poulsen, who is questioning the veracity of the planning consent given by the Highland Council. It's fair to say, without going into great detail, that we are robustly defending that position with Highland Council, and we look forward later this year to have that hearing in court. So subject to us completing these tasks, we are anticipating that by late 2022 or early 2023, we will have the UK's first orbital launch from Sutherland into a low Earth orbit around 500 kilometers. Next slide, please. So spaceport, again, another artist's impression with the lovely, it's absolutely a stunning location in terms of Ben Loyal in the background and Ben Hope off to the right. But what we are doing is not for space planes. There is some really exciting work being undertaken around the world about hypersonic travel and the ability to take off from one point and fly in space for part of the time to another point. So, for example, people are suggesting you could travel from the UK to New York in less than 2 hours. It is not manned space travel. There's been a number of people volunteering me to go on one of the first missions. I've declined. It's a one-way ticket. So this is not about putting people into space. It is about putting satellites into space. We won't be going to Mars from this location, and we certainly won't be building any Death Stars. But it is about the transportation and preparation of launch vehicles, assembling them in Sutherland. It will be about putting the satellites, small satellites, up to about 500 kilograms together. There'll be clean rooms on the site where they will be tested and then encapsulated into a spacecraft that's put on the top of the launch vehicle. It will be about fueling the launch vehicle once it's on the launch pad, and it certainly will be making sure that these small satellites are put into orbit to successfully monitor, for example, climate change and other essential tasks. Next slide, please. So again, through the schematic, you can see that the amount of energy that needs to be expounded to have a relatively modest payload into space. So about 9/10 of the weight of the vehicle, which is about 20 tons, is about fuel. And the fuel is made up of our chemistry students, an oxidizer, typically liquid oxygen, and then a hydrocarbon fuel, which in the case of Orbex is biopropane, very much like the liquid gas outside some of the houses that is used to cook and provide fuel in residences. The actual rocket systems are about 1/10, and the actual payload is about 1% of the total weight. And what you would find is that it actually is an incredibly efficient burning rocket inside the launch vehicle, and it would get us to that 500 kilometers in about 15 to 20 minutes. And it depends on the particular route that is used the day of launch. Next slide, please. So this is trying to look at the things in context. You may be aware, if you're a student of space, that the UK actually has had a launch vehicle put satellites into orbit before, and that was done in Australia using the Black Arrow launch vehicle. The Orbex vehicle is called a prime vehicle, is about slightly taller than the Black Arrow. I have to tell you, the technology is incredibly more enhanced. It's about 17 meters. It is not illustrations of the Vega launch vehicle here, about 30 meters tall. The Ariane 5 launcher, about 53 meters tall, or one of Elon Musk's Falcon 9, which is about 70 meters tall. They are launched from much larger spaceports. So it's important to look at what we're doing. And this ultimately is also something that is described around the world as new space. Old space is about governments funding launch for their own reasons, and new space is very much about having a commercial model that makes sense and can create jobs and actually have some really exciting new ideas happening here in the north. Next slide, please. So the economic impact is actually the reason we got involved in this, is that we are expecting within about 5 years of launch, there will be 40 local jobs. Now that means specifically on and around the spaceport. So in Sutherland and Tongue and Melness, we are very confident that we would have 40 or more local jobs, but with a further 200 jobs in the region. We do believe that Caithness in particular is very well situated to capture a number of those well-paid high-tech jobs, and we recognise and appreciate the tremendous work being done by Orbex, who already have a manufacturing facility down in Forres. You may have seen in the press, they have recently acquired a 3D printer, which is actually amongst the largest in Europe to build the rocket and the propulsion units. Initially, on the first launch, we do see that many of the staff will have to be flown in to Sutherland. And this is simply because the UK has not done orbital launch. But we know that these companies are incredibly keen to make sure that they can train local-based staff. So we see over a period of time, more and more people will be employed and used in the site, and some of those functions are really very exciting in terms of what's happening in the world. As I mentioned, Orbex opened their factory in Murray and Forres in February 19, and they're already looking at expansion plans. They've really had a tremendous successful route going forward. They recently concluded a Series B fundraise of $24 million and are raising further funds and seeing great success in that. Also importantly for us, the project Space Hub Sutherland has a great link with the rundown of Dounreay. So when people become available, just to be clear, it will not take everyone from Dounreay, but we do believe for those who want to have a really interesting, successful career in the north, Space Hub Sutherland will be a main component of the future. And we see some tremendous opportunities in this area. Next slide, please. So as we talked about, this is again the part of the planning application that shows the launch pad to the north of the site with the integration facility. So again, you would find that the launch vehicles would typically arrive at the site in a standard articulated lorry with a 40-foot ISO container on the back of it, and each launch vehicle would take approximately 2 of these articulated lorries. The satellites, the payload, can be delivered in anything from literally a white van to anything larger, but because the satellites go from anything that would fit into the palm of your hand to a microwave, and obviously larger. But I said already, the payloads will typically be less than 500 kilograms. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the launch and range control building. And I wonder if we can just click on to the next slide. So this is the Launch Operation Control Center. And again, you would have seen from the title slide, it has that interesting route into the building. And this is where you've probably heard before, launch control, typically what might happen, for example, at Cape Canaveral, and that controls the launch from the ignition and the clearance of the range. And then as the launch vehicle heads up, the way starts to gain speed towards that 27,000 kilometers an hour and starts to gain height, it does so very quickly. And this is controlled at this Launch Operation Control Center. There will also be space there for VIPs. Each launch vehicle and payload typically is costing about £6 million per launch, and the payload is on top of that. So this is where it will be controlled. It will then, once it approaches orbit, be moved to a mission control. Typically, we would have heard of that around Houston. So rather than Houston, we have a fantastic opportunity. We might hear Forres, where the mission control is going to be based for Orbex. We have a great opportunity. So again, exciting opportunities for the whole Highlands and Islands region. Next slide, please. Again, just a quicker look in the LSIF, the Launch Service and Integration Facility, where, as I've mentioned, there will be an assembly of the launch vehicle and various connections and testing happen to the launch vehicle. 2 clean rooms also in the building, where, as I said, there'll be various testing, inspection, and if appropriate, alteration of the satellites before they're encapsulated, meaning they're put into a safe and neutral environment in the spacecraft, and then that spacecraft is, of those lying in a horizontal position, is joined and various integration checks are undertaken. And then it is taken out along the route to the pad, and on the pad it's then erected to a vertical position, and typically within 1 hour it is then launched and off it goes to 500 kilometers. Next slide, please. This is just a run through of what the site will look. So thank you for that, Nicola. If you can just go to the next slide. So it is one of the things that's been really interesting for us is this journey where the environment, safety and security are all paramount. And we've had some fantastic input, as said already, from colleagues at NatureScot. And, you know, we are just as keen as the rest of the community to make sure we're doing something that's very safe. We believe, as we work towards this, this will become the greenest spaceport in the entire world, both a measure of what steps we're taking with the environment. We have redesigned, we've moved the roads, we're doing some really innovative work around the peat bog, which will make this site potentially carbon neutral. So we're very excited, as well as the work that will be done, as shown in the video, to really give fantastic needed information to fight climate change and the climate emergency. Next slide, please. So again, a lot of the data, probably not very well known, that is used to fight climate change is already obtained from space. And somebody once said to me, well, do we not have enough satellites up there? And the answer is no. You could imagine if we were relying on technology of 20 years ago, the difference that would make to our everyday life. And the answer is that we need to refresh the technology in space on an increasingly rapid time frame. And so we are seeing already that satellites already play a big part. They need to play an increasing part. And from space, we can really make a difference to how and what decisions need to be made to fight climate change. Next slide. So some of the things we're doing, we appreciate, again, work with the Highland Council. They have given us 34 planning conditions. We respect that, many of which we suggested. So we are sanitizing, carrying out the work for these planning conditions, and that's going well. We always knew, because we're building on common grazing, very much with the Crofters Agreement, we would have to apply to the Scottish Land Court, and we have submitted again in August last year an application for a scheme for development, which shows the benefits that will come, and that is going to take place in a hearing in May this year. And we're confident, still, you know, working very hard at it, that the Land Court will be positive about what we're doing and see the benefits. We have, as we've said, been in receipt and working with the Highland Council, who have had a judicial review taken against them. And we are working, we believe the process that we went through was robust and thorough and correct and professional. And we're therefore looking to robustly defend the judicial review and show that we did everything that we were required to do, and as did the Highland Council. We are doing further ground investigations. We've already had some work undertaken to make sure that we are very respectful of where the peat is and how we can actually successfully put in the 2 kilometres of road that was mentioned and the buildings. So that further ground investigation will help us make sure we do so both in an environmentally sound and a cost-effective manner. We are continue to monitoring. We did over 2 years of bird studies to make sure we are not harming these birds, and there is no significant impact on what will happen, and even during launch. So there'll be a long period of ongoing bird studies just to make sure that we've got a really good handle on what's happening on the ground. And then we expect later this year or early next year to start the actual construction. So spades being put into the ground, both literally and figuratively, to put in the road and then the launch pad and then the support buildings. And we do expect the first launch, as I said before, to be towards the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023. Next slide, please. So some of the conclusions, we believe passionately this will create employment and talent attraction, just as Dounreay did bring people to this area. if you want to be at the forefront of launch in Europe, this area will be attractive for you. I have said before, I'll say again, I think up in the north, and Ian, I think, is a good example of this. We have clever people doing clever things. And we believe this will cement the opportunity for people. I love the idea that some of our young people may decide to have a career in the space industry, and they can do that from the North Highlands. Said already, you know, we've got some fantastic skilled people working at Dounreay, and for some of those, this will offer opportunities for them. The project is still at risk. I've mentioned already the judicial review, and there are other issues that we have to overcome. So the project, I have to tell you, has had a number of risks that we have already overcome, but we are confident of this project completing and launching. We do think the prize for having this mainland, the only vertical launch mainland site in the whole of the UK, operational and putting satellites into space, has got some fantastic opportunities in terms of jobs and support industries. It is important we do this as soon as it makes sense. We have competition. There are some competing sites in the rest of the UK, but the real competition is in sites such as Andoya in Norway, in looking at the proposed development in the Azores in Portugal, and other sites such as that. And that's really where the competition lies for Sutherland. We do see tremendous opportunities about diversification for local economies. So when we look at the downstream activities, what does that mean? That means we get this data from space, and it has to be analyzed and interpreted, and then that information put into practice all around the world. So we see great opportunities that can come out of the site with regard to downstream activities, as well as space manufacture. There is no reason why satellites could not be made in the far north, where proximity to the spaceport is important to companies. So there's quite a range of how that can help advance current existing companies. We've already had some major space companies come and look and speak with some of the things that we already have in place. I use, for example, the eTech building in North Island College, and the people we've had from a number of different countries to visit that and are very impressed with the facilities we have here. So next slide, please. So I hope what I've said has been informative. It might have given you some pause for thought or posed some questions. And I'd now be delighted to answer any questions through Ian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy. If we can start off, can you hear me okay, Roy?
Hear you great, yes.
Yeah, I've got two questions actually from Cyber House. If the launch facility is showing success, will you be able to expand the current area for launching? And her other question is, will the Moyne have single or multiple launch pads?
Very good point. So let's be absolutely clear. The planning consent we have and what we're asking the Land Court for is a single pad. And just to mention that briefly, is that the old space idea shown by the European launch site in French Guiana is that you effectively have a launch complex for every technology. It's incredibly expensive. So we believe we will be able to launch different technologies from the one launch pad. So our current plans, one launch pad at this time.
Thank you, Roy. Stuart has, would Wick Airport also be upgraded and open up more international and domestic routes?
I certainly hope so. We have spoken with a number of companies who have indicated, and Wick Airport already has the capacity to take C-17 transport aircraft. So it would allow companies to bring in their 2 containers to ship out from Wick John O'Groats Airport to Des Moines and be assembled there. So I would love to see companies take advantage of the facilities we already have in Wick Airport.
Thanks, Roy. And I'm not sure if you or June would like to answer the next question, but Aileen has asked, will the roads be improved for access to the spaceport?
I'll take that one, Roy. In essence, absolutely yes. The Space Hub Sutherland project itself is absolutely concentrating on building out a spaceport, and therefore, we don't have an awful lot more money to be doing a lot of improvements on the roads. However, we're working with the Caithness and North Sutherland Regeneration Partnership, which Highland Council is part of, who's just announced a massive budget for North Coast 500 improvements. We've got HI that's just funded Destination Management Organisation to look at all the improvements around North Coast 500, and we will be starting conversations with them to see how can we improve around the Space Hub so that when people visit to watch a launch, we've got some good infrastructure in place. So working with them and also working with the local community through the local liaison group, we'll be exploring the art of the possible, and then obviously looking at different funding streams, because what we don't want to see is the spaceport costs ramping up. We've got to keep that quite tight because it's got to be commercial and viable, but we will be working with other partners to try and look at funding elsewhere to look at putting improvements in infrastructure in.
Thanks, June. That's really good. So, June, just to firm up that one, you said that there's a project to improve the whole of the North Coast 500 route and therefore our own roads?
Yeah, I mean, Highland Council has just announced a budget for the tourism sector, where it's looking at, they're setting money aside for, improving the roads, improving the passing places, looking at, more capacity for toilets, waste, all those sort of things. So our intention is to get involved with that, because obviously Tongue, Melnace is on that route. So therefore, we might as well work together and see what the art of the possible is. And we can look at other partners for other potential funding to add value to some of this work that's going on as well. So we'll look for other funding streams, but we're certainly going to be very active in making sure that we can do as much as we can to make sure the infrastructures create.
Thanks, June. I think a lot of people will be interested in the roads. June, maybe this one you give an answer. It's from Jill. Given this is a commercial venture, who are the main competitors and what will Space Hub Sutherland offer that differentiates from the others?
Yeah, well, I will say I think I answered that one, and I started off with right place, right time, right people. I think Roy's already alluded to the fact that we've got Dunray running down with a lot of highly skilled people there. We've got a lot of young, clever children who might want to take this up as a career. Roy's sort of alluded to it's not really competition within the UK. There are European countries. We believe even with other UK spaceports coming on board, there is space for us all. Because we're all catering for different elements of launch. And what I will say is, we are the only site with planning.
Okay, thanks, June. June, how about this one? Have Orbex not moved to Shetland?
No, Orbex are absolutely 100% behind Sutherland and have actually announced that they will launch nowhere else in Scotland but Sutherland. So we are absolutely 100% in partnership with Orbex.
Thanks, June. Chris has asked, has there been a construction provider found, and will there be an opportunity for me, that's Chris, to put his ideas on a vehicle to help with the construction and future infrastructure of the site?
Yeah, I think that's one that I answered as well through the chat. One of the things, but we haven't procured a construction company yet. We're not at that stage as yet. But what I have been doing is I have been trying to collect as much of the local capability that we've got, because the reason we're doing this is to make sure Caithness and North Sutherland thrive. So my hope is we gather enough of the local capability so when we do actually procure the construction company, we're actually providing them with their solutions. They don't have to go out with the county to go and get different capabilities. So I did actually leave my email address on the chat to say, drop me a line and tell me what it is you've got, and we'll absolutely add it to the list and make sure it's passed on when we procure the construction company.
Thanks very much. Fiona would like to know how many launches would there be a year? And also, thanks for the interesting presentations. Sounds very exciting for the future of the Far North. So if any of our listeners have got any comments to give on the speaker's presentation, we're welcome to send it. But how many launchers would there be a year?
So if I can say that one, Ian, the planning conditions from the planning consent make it very clear there will be a maximum of 12 launches per annum. Now, noting again, as I said, there is one pad, and your launch campaigns will vary between 20 and 30 days to prepare, erect and launch the vehicle. So we do see a maximum currently planned of 12 launches per year.
And if I could add to that, Ian, the economic case showed that we could be viable with 6 launches per year.
Right. So you don't see this escalating to more than 12 then?
So I would, to put it in context, it's important, you know, many people are suggesting very large numbers of launch, indeed outside of Sutherland. And put it in context, 2 years ago, the total number of orbital launches in the world was 90. So just to be clear, you know, it is not expected that there will be even one orbital launch in the UK and indeed Europe until next year. So I think we're very comfortable the fact that working with the community, working with the planning authorities and the relevant licensing authorities that will shortly come into power, 12 launches is a big number, given this has not yet happened ever.
Right, thanks very much. Eleanor would like to know, is there a visitor centre planned in order to capitalise from the facility?
Brilliant question. We would love to see a visitor centre take shape. We are working with the local community, so we are not planning on building a visitor centre, but there are a number of options in the local area, and I think to help development of STEM activity, tell the story, fascinating story, and show what is happening, I think a visitor centre would be a great outcome, but we see that being led by the community. Thanks
very much. David would like to know, first he says, thank you for your really informative talk. What has the environmental impact assessment determined will be the environmental impacts of the launch stage? What happens to the rocket body? Will it be recovered?
Oh, brilliant question again, because currently what happens is it's a 3-stage launch vehicle. The first stage is normally ejected after it's spent its fuel and dropped into the ocean. So that is something that would happen on the first launch. Orbex, I know with other launch vehicles, are looking at ways to recover and reuse that launch first stage. We have seen, Ian, again, it's absolutely remarkable, where on some cases, this is happening with Rocket Labs, and there are plans for another launcher, where when they eject the first stage, it is actually caught before it goes into the sea by use of helicopters and drogue chutes, and they actually catch the first stage mid-air and return it for reuse. So the way forward and the plans for Sutherland will include reuse of the first stage. The second stage is burned up on re-entry into the atmosphere.
Thanks, Roy. That sounds quite a challenge to capture the first stage.
And if I share with you, again, not able to share with the callers, but I've actually seen how they do it using very heavy weights. It's a remarkable innovation and talent of the helicopter pilots. So it is something that's coming.
Okay, so there's jobs for helicopter pilots trying to catch these stages. Wow. Moving on, Stuart would like to know, will you begin construction as soon as the current concerns, objections have been cleared, and how long will construction take?
The answer is yes. You can understand we're going through, we're very happy to be going through appropriate legal challenges. We're not concerned with them, though we're addressing them very seriously. But once they have been put aside, and once we have the authorization of the High Board, and almost certainly on this project, we'll also take it to Scottish Government, again, who's already been supportive, we would look to procure that construction partner that June talked about very quickly and move to actually breaking ground as soon as we could.
Right, thank you. I've got a very topical one now from Bill. Bill is asking, is there potentially detrimental effects to the population mixing because of the use of international staff, and has this been investigated?
So it's been investigated very thoroughly. We would love for there to be suitably qualified and experienced people, in the region on the first launch. It's not possible. Understandably, it would be like asking for people to come forward on the first day of the operation of a nuclear facility when no training had been provided. However, it is very much in the economic interest of the companies, and this is what they've done around the world. As they set up their home here, they will bring people in. You could imagine bringing people in, whether it's from Europe or America or other countries, is expensive. So they will be looking to ramp up, where opportunities can be made for local people. And that's something we've been very clear about. It is in the company's commercial interest to do so. And we would love to see, we believe we will see modern apprenticeships as well as other job-specific training given to allow local people to participate.
Thanks, Roy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roy. Nice comment from Stuart. It looks like this will have considerably less environmental impact than your average wind farm. Well done. Moving on,
Yeah.
Ross is a young Scottish physics graduate. What would be your advice in getting involved in this project?
So I think there's a number of things. So first of all, Orbex, based out of Forres, but likely to have staff here in the north. I would certainly look at their webpage, and I would send a CV to them now if you're interested in getting involved. But there will be very specific job opportunities for running and the operations of the spaceport and the control center we've talked about. There's ground service equipment, there's meteorology, there's a number of other disciplines that will be required. So I would continue to look at our website, www.spacehubsutherland.com, and see when plans are coming forward. I think what we will see as we have the first launch, I've said, in a couple of years, and then the cadence of launch will increase. And as that happens, there'll be more and more job opportunities. So I think
yeah. Sorry, just to add to that, Roy, if Ross wants to pass his CV on to me as well, I'm also collecting a lot of interested CVs at the minute. And as soon as we've got that launch service provider that will operate the plant, we'll be passing these all on as well.
Right, thanks very much, June. If I could move on, David has two questions. Could you give examples of some of the planning conditions, and will there be ongoing environmental monitoring, groundwater quality, ecological impacts, ground contamination? And his other question was, how would a fixed spaceport compete with a facility such as Virgin's capability to launch from a 747?
Brilliant question. So some examples of the planning conditions which are available on the Highland Council website include, exactly as described, the need to have ongoing environmental monitoring, both for birds and plants and water quality. And we are fully committed to do that for the period notion. We believe it will be entirely safe, but there will be a lot of monitoring, both during construction and indeed after construction into operation. We've also got a number of conditions around the construction facility, and to make sure that that happens, there'll be an environmental clerk of works, and we'll be very careful about what we do during construction. Also, we have conditions around a visitor management plan, and we believe this will be a very exciting thing to come and watch. And we want to make sure that people have a great experience, but also the environment is protected during those launch sequence. Could you remind me of the two other points, Ian? Forgive me.
Was it the launch
Yeah.
from the 747, the competition from Virgin?
Yes. So it's really interesting debate. We regard, and I think we're not alone in this, is that there has been vertical launch for decades. It's understood. It's a proven and tested way to put things into space. Horizontal launch is a new and experimental way. I think for those who have followed the Virgin story, will see how long it has taken them to get to the point where they sling a load underneath typically an aircraft, take it to about 30, 40,000 feet, and then drop the load and it launches. So you're escaping the first 30 or 40,000 feet, but currently the launch load and launch cost are punitive. It will work for certain type of experimental loads. So we believe that vertical launch will offer a more cost-effective route for the vast majority of payloads going into space.
Thanks, Roy. We've got a bunch of questions still to answer, Roy. Happy to continue?
Please, yes.
Yeah. Tommy would like to know who will own the spaceport, Orbex or Space Hub HIE?
So the current plans, this has been taken forward by High plans to award a commercial contract. So High currently is planned will own the asset. And we also have the lease with the Crofters, which we're very keen to make sure we honour.
Thank you. Yoni would like to know, is the proposed launch site specific to the Orbex launch vehicle, or would it be capable of hosting a different manufacturer's launch vehicle?
Now, very important, we really appreciate the input from Orbex, which has helped us in the design stage. So there is no doubt at all that Orbex launch vehicle Prime can launch from this site. I've mentioned we are in discussion with 4 other technologies who could launch from this site. We're very, very clear the site needs to be multi-technology, and that's to make sure that we spread the risk and increase the number of jobs in the area.
Thank you. David would like to know, what will be the weather conditions required for a safe launch?
Oh, great, and we have some good weather. The main concern on weather is wind. So therefore, under the current conditions, if the wind gust speed is exceeding 40 knots, that's a no-go for launch. And it's just the fact when the launch vehicle takes off, initially, sudden veering of the wind can cause problems. So it's a wind consideration where 40 knots becomes a no launch criteria. But thankfully, while the wind can blow, both in Caithness and Sutherland, actually we've had 3 years of monitoring data, and we believe you could launch. So launching during the summer, bluntly, is relatively safe and almost without any restriction. Even during the winter, even during some of the storms, there are weather windows that you could perform a launch safely.
Okay, if I could, I've got a question from Derek Young, Institute of Physics in Scotland. If and when the site is built and operational, what do you see would be the educational possibilities for school children visiting the site, learning about space exploration and ecology?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, almost unlimitless. There are some examples where you can show kids videos and get them speaking to people who've been involved in the sectors. That's brilliant. But actually, we would love to see students come along and take part. We've talked about the opportunity for simulations on site of launch and helping them understand issues around propulsion and avionics and telemetry, etc. But we believe there will be opportunities for children to get involved in space missions and students. So, one of the issues, as I've already mentioned, there's currently a dearth of people qualified and experienced on the launch industry in the UK. So we see some tremendous opportunities both for school students and tertiary students to get involved in real missions as well as simulations.
Thanks, Roy. I've got another question which I think is very interesting. I'd like to amplify it as well. It's from Derek, and would the Sutherland site be in competition with the proposed launch sites for satellites in Unst, Shetland? Now, I've got an addition to that. I was lucky enough to go to a space exhibit in Colorado Springs. Digger Carey, the astronaut, walked around with me, and we went to the UK Space Agency desk, and we saw that there was a whole range of proposed launch sites in Europe and indeed in the United Kingdom. So there's a lot of competition for this. So could you tell us a little about the competition and also the Shetland one, please?
Definitely. So, Shetland is currently going through its planning consent. As June mentioned, we already have that established in August last year. We wish Shetland the very best. We do see they are proposing something that is bigger, heavier than we use. So they are certainly looking at the ability to launch payloads greater than 500 kilograms. So we believe in some work that we will release shortly that the total addressable market offers opportunities for a number of sites in the UK.
Okay.
But importantly, the thing that's going to make the difference is commercial. We mentioned this is all about who can offer the best product at the right time, at the right price. So I think some of the questions that will have to come forward is, can the money be raised? Can we actually offer a service that's fast, effective, and at the right price?
Thanks, Roy. Araz would like to, has a question, and either you or Jin could maybe handle this, please. Could you introduce a platform for available jobs in the site to apply for?
I think, I'll make a comment and then grateful if June could make a comment. So we would love that to happen. That undoubtedly would be a site by the companies who would employ. So High is delighted to have brought this project to the table. The people who will be employing people going forward, I love the idea of a platform which then brings together opportunities that are growing and expanding. But June, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I've just got to agree. I was actually just about to respond right into that, where when we did go for planning, we did outline a number of jobs ranging from the very techie ones to the housekeeping to the security, but it was very broad brush. This is what we believe is going to be required. But like you said, Roy, it's going to be launch providers, launch operators that are going to be looking for these jobs. And again, I'll just say, if anybody has got an interest and wishes to send in their CV to me, I will collate them and we will hand them over as soon as we know who's operating what.
Thanks very much. Neil and Edwin have similar questions. What is the typical lifetime of these types of satellites, and what are the arrangements of recovery of satellites at the end of their useful lifetime?
So, brilliant question. Currently, when it would cost you £80 million to put a satellite in space, I've already mentioned this is about 6 million. You can see the difference in the business model. You wanted to get value for money. So many of the satellites that were put up were up there for approximately 20 years. Now that's great because they are very good at doing the job they were put up there. But you think of the technological advances over 20 years. So they would do the job put up there, but they miss out on the technology refresh. So what we're seeing on the satellites that are likely to be launched typically will have a design life of about 3 years. And this means that they will then be deorbited, re-enter into the Earth's atmosphere, be consumed rather than lie around in space. And the next latest technology in optics or software or aviation will then be able to be applied and reused in space. So it's a significant difference that means the technology upgrades in space dramatically change.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm coming to just 2 or 3 more questions left, and if any of the audience want to give comments on the talk, they're welcome to do so now. Vicky would like to know, is there any data on emissions or air quality impacts from this type of launch?
The answer is yes, and it is in our substantial submission to the Highland Council in terms of planning. The great thing is the exhaust fumes from what we're doing, this is hugely important to us, is basically water and CO2. So the engines, in order to perform how they must, have to be incredibly efficient. So we're very clear that there is a CO2 emission. but there's water. There are no other nasty exhaust gases coming out. So that's very, very important. And if you look at other fuels that might be used in other areas, it's not the same. There can be some nasty exhaust fumes. But in Sutherland, we will not be doing that.
Thanks. Bill would like to know, at what point is the vehicle filled with fuel?
It's great. So all the time in the integration facility, it is not fueled. Once it has fuel in it, as you can imagine, it is then a very high risk item of being consumed. So it is taken onto the launch pad unfueled. It's then erected unfueled. And then as there's a countdown, a very specific launch window, and it's fueled on that schedule. As I said, typically about 1 hour or less from actual launch.
Thank you. Hugh has got a comment. Thanks for the informative presentation and for taking all the questions. Most appreciated. Thanks, Hugh. Jonathan would like to know, are there any provisions for producing and storing the fuels and oxidizer locally?
It's a very good question. So the liquid oxygen has to be cryogenically stored. And even then, there is some bleed off in the oxygen. So what is tend to be worked out is a route where just in time, the fuel loads are provided in oxygen. For the biopropane and the potential kerosene that might be used, there will be local storage options. We would love to think, and we believe it may be the case, that there may be opportunities for fuel production, such as liquid oxygen, in the area. That will be obviously when the launch cadence has got larger.
That's really good. So our hospitals will never run out of oxygen then, eh?
Absolutely.
Yeah. William would like to know, would there be any jobs in terms of research or analysing data for physicists at the Space Hub, or is it mainly just engineers for the launch process?
So there's quite a wide range of jobs. The whole downstream activity, which is that analysis of data, hugely important. We believe that a portion of that downstream activity, which is currently not undertaken in the North Highlands, would be a new opportunity for people in the North. We do see that a range of other jobs, meteorology I've mentioned, the whole idea of making and producing satellites could be done in the North, but certainly the data mining and data analysis and investigative work could be, and we believe we'll be looking to attract companies like that to the North.
If I could amplify that, Roy, when you
Please.
said that local companies could get involved perhaps in building things, my company has built equipment for NASA, supplied services to European Space Agency, and built equipment for the China Space Agency. So really, it's just your own horizon. Of course, I think it's possible for engineers to get involved and contribute. Yeah. I've got some comments. Neil, great presentation, thank you. I really hope this goes forward. It's a fantastic opportunity for the North of Scotland. David, thank you for a great presentation. Learned a lot, found it interesting. And Cyber House would ask, how long until I can sit on my patio in Beddyhill, supping a G&T, watching the first launch?
So I hope it will be within 2 years. I've already said we are looking towards the end of 22, beginning of 23. But you're right, what a fantastic, and you will see it from there, depending on cloud cover, but what a fantastic opportunity to do these things.
Yeah, and can I just add, she better get the bottle in and we'll all come and join her.
Right. Coming to the end, last few questions. Martin has been patient. Could the site be expanded in future to launch larger vehicles?
So anything's possible. Clearly, I've already said that we're very clear what we're looking to achieve right now, the consent we have right now. We need to make a success of that. Any future plans would have to go through the normal democratic process of planning consent, mindful of the environment, and indeed undoubtedly a second visit to the land court. So it is possible to scale these things up. We're very clear that currently we're looking at maximum of 12 launches a year.
Right. I've got 3 more comments in the final question. Sylvia said, thanks for a great talk, really informative. Martin, absolutely fascinating presentation and Q&A. Many thanks. Good luck with the project. Looking forward to the first launch.
Thank you.
Hugh, thanks for the very informative debate. Scott, thanks for the great presentation. Following this with great interest. Fantastic opportunity that will hopefully inspire a great number of learners to pursue careers in STEM. Audrey, thanks and good luck. And the last question from Cyber House, and it's a very good one. Will there be habitation modules on site for launch staff, as there are not many houses in the area and it's a long way to get anywhere? That's the last question.
No, again, another great question. So we have undertaken audits of what's available. There are in that area some excellent houses currently used for, holiday homes. So we do believe that, there will be people who want to come and live in that part of the world, beautiful part of the world. And housing needs to be addressed, both social housing and other types of housing. But we do believe there'll be great opportunity for people who want to come and visit and see the area. I do believe, I mean, I'm lucky enough just to live just outside of Ray, so I can get there in about an hour. But I think accommodation both for staff and visitors is something that will have to be closely monitored.
Thanks very much. Quick comment from Cecile. Live long and prosper, Captain Kirk.
Quite right, thank you.
Right, thanks, Cecile, for that one. If it's okay, I'd like to stop now with the presentation and thank Roy and June very much. So thumbs up from us for doing it. I'd like to just introduce a couple of other talks. At 7 p.m. tomorrow on Wednesday, our event is Forensic Science, the Real Deal, and we'll explore how true-to-life TV programs really are in a no-holds-barred question and answer session around crime investigation, forensic science, including demonstrations around how evidence is gathered and analysed. On Thursday, also at 7 o'clock, Dr. Michael Leach, who's very well known in Caithness, otherwise known as Gorilla Man. He's an author and wildlife photographer, and he's going to join us to explore animal intelligence research that reveals it's not just humans who are tempted to tell untruths. Roy, tell untruths. Behave badly, animals do too. Real meat, drunken monkeys, psychotic magpies, spaced out lemurs, smooth talking cornbirds, and his talk, Animals Behaving Badly. One of our committee said, just another day in Wick then. So, and Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we're set to enjoy a guided tour of the moon from members of the Caithness Astronomy Group who have supported this festival tremendously. These are 3 short sessions exploring our celestial neighbour with live stream observations if weather's permitting. All details are available on our website, Science03. Thanks again for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoy the rest of the programme. And from the Science Committee panel, Roy and June, good night from us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.